All right, let's go.
And welcome back, everybody, to another Planet Mullins podcast. I used to do goofy stuff like this. Hey, and now we're in season 6, and I'm thrilled today to have really one of the finest lyricists in jazz royalty. Someone I'm a huge fan of her work, and I knew her dad, the famous jazz writer Leonard Feather. Please welcome Lorraine Feather to the show. Hi, Lorraine.
Hi, Rob. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, so you're coming in from New York today or Los Angeles? I know you've kind of bounced between both places.
I've lived a few different places. I'm in Rochester, New York now.
Okay. And
Flower City.
the what?
It's called Flower City, Flower, and it used to be called Flower City Our because of some grain thing.
It's a grainy thing. Well, how was your winter this winter? It was brutal, I heard from most of my friends in
Well,
Buffalo and stuff.
it wasn't that bad. There are people who called me from time to time and said, "Oh my God, are you okay? I heard that you got 27 inches of snow yesterday." I said, "No, that was Buffalo,
Buffalo, right.
not Rochester." It wasn't so terrible, but the
That's good
spring here is
because
exquisite.
well, us creative types, or maybe the correct grammar, we creative types, we try and survive during the weather stuff. And I remember years ago talking to someone who was living in Europe, and they said, "Well, you know why there is so much esoteric jazz that comes out of Europe on the ECM label?" And I said, "No, I don't know why." And he said, "Because there's nothing to do for 9 months of the year, snowed in, but drink and listen to music together." And that's how a lot of those albums get composed. But in your case, you've done now 13 solo albums, which is a huge
Uh-huh.
accomplishment. And your latest one, I also have the artwork on your upcoming one, but your latest one is My Own Particular Life. And we were talking about that a few minutes ago during prep. And you said that one of the songs, Music on the Ceiling, is a particularly popular jazz song of yours. And, jazz popularity, none of us will ever be Taylor Swift, but
Right.
I'm fascinated with your lyrics and with you. And I've waited all
You.
these years to talk to you. And yay, I'm glad to have you on the show. So let's
I'm
start there
happy to.
with that song that you wrote and tell us about that.
It's called Music from the Ceiling. It was written with Eddie Arkin, who's my very close friend and co-producer, co-creator of my albums for a long time,
Okay.
and primary co-writer. So usually when I write these songs with my collaborators, who are for the last few years Eddie, Russell Ferrante, Shelley Berg, Dave
Great.
Grusin,
Wow.
um, it's music, lyrics first. But in this case,
Oh,
Eddie had written something on guitar that his wife Pat called in from the other room and said, "Oh, that's so beautiful." And I put lyrics to it after I had gotten together with Eddie, and I happened to hear him playing this. And I had dinner with my ex-husband, Tony Morales, drummer, who was with the Rippingtons and a lot of other people.
Tony is a very
Yeah,
famous LA studio guy, and I actually recorded with him in the Rippingtons a couple times. Yeah,
he was
very.
a wonderful touring musician, and he
Oh,
played with
yeah.
Ricky Jones, Peggy Lee, who was my mom's roommate and Aunt Peggy to me. But
Peggy
his
Lee
line,
was your mom. What? Wait a minute. Wait.
yes, I have photos.
Of you and Peggy Lee when you were a kid or something?
No, I have photos of my mother and Peggy Lee when they were young roommates, young, blonde, gorgeous roommates. I'll send you. There are
Oh
a lot
my
of things that
God.
I have to send you. I don't know if you have room or space for them all,
Oh
but
yeah, I'll find a way to use anything. Man, yeah, folks, you're with jazz royalty right here with Lorraine
well,
Feather, just so you
that
know.
just
And
is
she's
not
not even
anything that
charging me
I
to do this interview.
caused. It just was. But
Wow.
Tony was a wonderful drummer, and he was beginning to lose his faculties at this point. So he had been found wandering on the freeway a few weeks previous to this
Wow.
dinner. Yeah, it was very devastating. So we
Sad.
went
Yeah.
out to dinner, Joey's girlfriend and Tony and me. And he was mostly silent. He was sitting next to me, but then he looked up at the loudspeaker above us and he said, "Why is music coming from the ceiling?" So
Okay.
it just broke my heart. We said goodbye in the parking lot and I hugged him. I'm very emotional. I was crying, going, "Tony, Tony." And he said, "It's really nice to meet you. I think you're very beautiful. I hope I see you again." He had no
Wow.
idea who I was. And so I wrote this music with this song with Eddie, to Eddie's music.
Mhm.
The recording has Michael Valerio on bass at the
Okay.
beginning, and
He's
it's just,
great. Yep.
yeah. And for some reason, it gets a lot of play on K Jazz. I wouldn't have expected it because it doesn't have a full band, and it's about a heavy subject. But I guess I'm sure people can relate to it, and they probably know what it's about.
Well, you can always, I think in jazz, the genre of jazz for me historically, and maybe you'll agree, has been something where the long form and the deep, meaningful lyrics are allowed in our
Yeah,
genre,
yeah,
because
like Lush Life.
yeah, that was exactly where I was going to go, was
Yeah,
to Lush
those
Life,
that
because the
rot with the rest
lyrics,
of those whose lives are lonely too.
yeah,
And now a
the lyrics,
commercial, you know.
I came to the lyrical side of composition way later in my life because I was just so fascinated with chords and harmony.
Yeah,
And I didn't really, in my whole career with the hundreds of compositions, there's only a few ones that are, have words. But I just noticed in your writing and some of these historical figures that you're kind of the face, to me, you're kind of the face of the modern jazz lyricist with your work because it's brilliant. You're jazz royalty. You're super witty. Like,
right.
you're witty. And I watch your Facebook posts and I'm like, that's a person that I think would have tested out of high school. Like, you know, oh, she probably didn't need high school. She probably didn't need college because she was just like born with some sort of a love and knowledge about how to use language. And you don't really go to school for that, or how did you be?
No, no, it just came, it really came out of nowhere. Of course, I was surrounded by incredible music through my childhood, but I didn't start writing lyrics seriously until I was in my early 30s. And
Wow.
I had moved from New York back to LA, and I got into this vocal trio, Full Swing, which was me, Charlotte Crossley from the Harlettes and Jesus Christ Superstar, a show I was in,
Uh-huh.
and Steve March Torme. But the head of it was Richard Perry, who was a big pop producer at the time,
Okay.
and he wanted us to record something that was written by Tommy Newsom of the Tonight Show.
I remember Tommy. Yeah.
He said, I'm going to hire a lyricist to write lyrics to this Tommy Newsom piece." I went, maybe I could do it. And
Wow.
at the time, I'd made some kind of half-assed attempts at writing lyrics when I was in my 20s, trying to be commercial, and it just wasn't very successful or interesting. And he said, "Well, okay, give it a shot." But because I grew up listening to Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross, the idea of writing lyrics to something complicated, a big band tune, for example, with a lot
Right.
of interesting changes, it was something I understood. So I went home and I wrote this lyric and brought it back, and I sang it through nervously for Richard and the other two singers, and they're being very quiet. And
Right.
Richard goes, "I hate it. It should be about something else entirely. It should be about a club where everybody wants to go, and it's very glamorous, and people are doing cocaine. It was the 80s,
Right.
and all this kind of stuff." I went,
Oh.
"Okay, okay, okay." I'm making notes. And so I went home, brought it back, and he said, "Yeah, okay, we'll record it." And I wound up writing lyrics for half the album. But the thing is that I had been trying. At one point, I wanted to be a dancer. I took dance class, but I started too late. I didn't really have the talent or the body. I was singing in clubs, and I just, to make some money. I had been a very unsuccessful aspiring actress, and all of a sudden, I'd come upon this thing that was so natural to me, and that I could do all by myself.
Wow.
Right? Because I'm
Right.
an only child. I'm somewhat solitary, and
Uh-huh.
and it was just so much fun. It was not that it was easy, but it was exciting and organic to me, and it changed my entire life. It became the center of my life.
And the thing that I think that I want to share, because there's a lot of young people, like I look at my YouTube stats and stuff, there's a lot of people in high school and college that come to my channel because I have all of these amazing producers and singers and Emmy Award winning and Grammy winners and stuff. And they come to watch the shows because they're looking for, advice, and they're looking for a direction. And in your case, the thing that I want to point out to these younger viewers of mine, Lorraine, you were 32 when this all kind of started coming together.
Yes, and I'm now 74.
You're 74.
Yes, I'll be 75 in September.
So look, folks, the thing about it is that you have to actually give yourself the time and the permission to develop into something. Like, I was a rare case. I knew right away when I was really young. My mom listened to jazz music, and my dad was not supportive, but I got into bands really young. I learned to read music really young, and I just kind of went on and off. I went on my path, but it's not that typical. And I think both you and I shared that thing that was a big deal back during our early lives, which was, if you haven't made it by 30, you're not going to make it. It
Exactly.
was like
That's
a thing.
exactly it. And in fact, that's what our Eddie's in my song in the Warren Beatty movie you and I were discussing
Oh
is about.
yeah.
It's called The Rules Don't Apply, and it's about a young person who thinks it's all over for her because
Uh-huh.
she hasn't made it. And Warren, in fact, told me a story about being being a young movie star, whatever he was, 24, and some director producer saying to him, "Oh yeah, well I got an 18-year-old that's coming up that's going to just blow you out of the water." So that's the way I felt about it. And in
Oh wow.
fact, it took me another 15 years to think that maybe I could record on my own, which I was doing not because I was just dying to hear my voice on record or I really wanted to go out and work at clubs, but just because I wanted to write songs that appealed to me. And
Right.
that was my path. And then I did it first to the music of Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn and Fats Waller, and then
And you just kind of did all this on your own.
yeah, I did it all on my own, just scraped together the money, one chapter at a time of the album. And
Wow.
I've had a couple of small record companies I've worked with, but nobody ever gave me ever, except with the Richard Perry thing. I never got an advance or really any financial help, and it
Wow.
wasn't easy. I'm definitely not wealthy, but
Incredible.
started working with these guys, Eddie Arkin and Russell Ferrante, Shelley Berg and Dave
Dave
Grusin,
Grusin.
and it just it became so interesting. And any work that I've ever gotten as a lyricist, like for cartoons, soap operas, I had seven Emmy nominations. One was for Jesse Norman singing an operatic piece in the Olympics. That was written with Mark Waters, my other close friend.
Okay.
Every piece of work I've ever gotten has come out of somebody hearing one of my albums, passing it on to
Right.
somebody else. It just kind of happened. So that's the way it's been for
That's
quite
ex
a while.
that's exciting because I learned too, as my own career has gone like all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom and all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom. You're on this, it's like the jazz cycle. It's like a roller coaster, that does what it does. But I learned to think many years ago from, I think maybe it was Don Grusin, who I worked with quite a bit,
I
Dave
worked with
Grusin's
Don, yeah.
brother. And yeah, I talked to Don last year because we were going to try and do a two piano thing, and then he had to have back surgery, so it didn't happen. But Don was one of those guys that always had great advice. And I remember some of his advice was think of every album that you do as the demo for the next upcoming project. And if you
Yeah.
think of that, you know, because you're all passionate and you're all in and you're working hard and sleepless nights and you got your release schedule and everything, you put it out there. And then in my case, many times, and obviously, as you just said, in your case, people would hear the album, they would hear it on the radio, they would talk. That word of mouth thing. I mean, the jazz community, it's much bigger now that we have 10,000 virtuoso vegan bass players coming out of Berkeley every 15 minutes. And, you know, I didn't realize that jazz was now a vegan genre. Apparently, me and my ribeye steak, I'm just the old
Well,
dinosaur
I eat
man.
fish personally, but
I'm the dinosaur man now with my ribeye and my brown rice on my diet. But it's an interesting thing because if you approach your career with that mindset,
Mhm.
it really helps. And in your case, so one album just led to the next project. And I didn't know that you had done cartoons and those kind of things, but
Yeah, yeah. I did cartoons. I wrote for soap operas, and which I don't. That's not my cup of tea, really. I don't care for them, but I wrote the libretto for an operatic piece with a wonderful composer named Bill Elliott that
wow.
was performed with Barbara Hannigan last October. Barbara Hannigan is a soprano. She won the Best Artist Award, the Gramophone for Best Artist, the Classical Music Award, last
Wow.
year. And she sings. She's an incredible soprano who conducts while she sings. She's just
Unbelievable.
unbelievable. I think I sent you the link for that. But
Okay.
yeah, I do a lot of different things in my own albums. Like I have added one composer to the group of people I work with on this upcoming album, The Green World, which is who is Arturo O'Farrell. We were chatting together on Facebook about something unrelated to music, and he wrote me a little note like that he really loved my stuff, and we wound up talking. And so when I got together to work on a song with him, and he said, I just really dig your albums. They're kind of mystical. And then he
Yeah.
looked at me little sideways. He went, "They're not jazz." I went,
Oh, really?
"They've been nominated for jazz." I said, "But I understand what you mean. They aren't exactly." And he said, "It's an entry point for you, but they're not technically." He said, "They're not traditional jazz." And well, I said, "Yeah, I know."
Well, in listening to your stuff, I didn't really, I hope I'm not going to insult the Ken Burns crowd by saying that, you know, your music isn't really that authentic, dated, old, because the Ken Burns crowd, you know, they all jazz not, died in 1960. But you just mentioned here in the show that that's what you cut your teeth on as you pulled up these Duke Ellington tunes and Strayhorn, and you
Yeah,
wrote and practiced with that as your writing foundation, and then turned it into your own deal, which is the same thing that I did.
yeah.
Right. And so now when people, you know, are all, "Oh, well, you know, what do you think about the Ken Burns thing? And jazz died in 1960." And I said, well, I started composing in high school and I could have just agreed with Ken and committed suicide. Ken Burns drives young Denver high school jazz student to an imminent death
Well, it,
because
it depends on your definition. I don't scat. Um, I don't read
you're
writing.
kind of too classy for that. I'm sure I'll get hate mail for saying you're too
Oh,
classy for
you've already,
scatting.
I'm sure there are people are writing you hate mail about the Ken Burns thing already, but
No, I get hate mail just because I'm white and over 60. So,
I see.
but
Well,
go ahead.
um, yeah, I don't do a traditional thing, and I try not to do songs that's well. This has a lot to do with my composer collaborators, but that sound like Great American Songbook songs. And I talk during my albums. I don't,
Uh-huh.
for some reason, it's just something I started doing early on.
Right.
And it's just natural for me. I have sections where I just speak. Um, and it's just, it's a thing I do. And
You're
I
kind of
also,
doing,
I really liked adding harmonies. Sorry, hold on a thought. And I do all my own harmonies. Sometimes they're sort of complicated, and the guys are very nice, and they send me the full thing, like the choral intro, and then they send me each piece like with a click, 1, 2, 3, 4, note, 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 weird
Right.
transition, note, note. But it's fun.
Well, the it's a high level of what I like to call musical literacy. And, there's a very small market for that kind of a thing. And the fact that you're able to pull that off, sound like a unique person after, listening to more of your stuff really in more detail, what I came up with is that you're kind of like the Joni Mitchell of jazz.
Thank you.
Because Joni took folk music early on in these like really simple things, but then all of a sudden she developed into being able to write that song Twisted, which was to me a turning point in her
Well,
writing.
she didn't write Twisted.
I mean, to recording
To
Twisted,
record it, yeah.
which to me
Kind
was,
of an outlier on that album, but it was cool.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and then the fact that that song in those days became a popular radio hit. I mean, radio now is just awful. In
Yeah.
I mean, I
It's
think I don't know how you're finding it, but it's just now we're being flooded with all this mediocre stuff. It's nuts.
well, I just I accept the fact that when I do an album, I'm hopefully, my dad used to tell me, don't use hopefully like that. It doesn't, that's not the way it's, but the dictionary has accepted it,
Uh-huh.
hopefully I'll be able to do such and such. He said, you should go, it is to be hoped. I go, nobody's going to say that.
It is
But
to be hoped.
it's okay. Hopefully means that I'm that you're expressing hope. But anyway, that hopefully some of my songs, our songs, will get played on the radio, and I think about that. Well, this one, maybe it's a ballad or it's a shuffle, but I just accept the fact there are certain programmers out there. I love people who do the on-air people for radio. They're so wonderful.
Right,
I can't think of anybody I've ever spoken to that I dislike. They do it for little or no money, and
right,
they truly love the music. So there are people out there who have always played some stuff from my albums, and then there are stations that simply won't. That they just said, it's just, I'm sorry. What a promoter I was working with on one of them said, he was very honest. He said, yeah, they just said to me, quite frankly, those lyrics of hers, they're a little over my head, and I'm not in this, this weirdo, album, and I accept that. And I've had this conversation with Eddie Arkin a few times. We'll
mhm,
be working on something. He'll go, I don't know if anyone's ever going to play this on the radio. I said, that's okay. It's really okay. We'll
uh-huh.
just we'll do what we like, and some of it will get played on the radio, I hope, and there, uh, from there, it'll be whatever it's going to be.
I'm
I
a,
want us to be happy.
I agree 100%, and that's a fantastic perspective and very mature perspective for you to have. Now, I want to go back to something you said earlier about being a solitary person or an only child, because what I noticed in my family with two older sisters, they were older enough that I
Yeah.
felt like an only child most of the time because by the time I hit high school, they were gone.
Someone just said something similar to me yesterday. Yeah, I know what that means.
Yeah. And the solitary thing for me has always been really when I'm able to feel the most mentally level.
Yeah.
It's when I can create the best, when there's no people, there's no distractions, there's just me and the keyboard instrument, which
Mhm.
ended up being, I mean, I was a drummer for years, but it's mostly my writing instrument of choice is the piano. And in the current world today, I see on Facebook and Instagram, is your child lonely? Are they, spending too much time in their basement? Are they, on the internet all day, but they feel empty inside? I was so glad there was no internet when I was lonely because you know what I had? I had Dave Brubeck LPs, I had Count
Yeah.
Basie, I had Glenn Miller. I had Buddy Rich when Buddy Rich came out. Hal Blaine, the greatest studio drummer of all time. That was my first drum lesson was Hal Blaine's double album called
Wow.
Let's Play Drums.
Yeah.
And so then I started taking lessons, and with all of this stuff, music was always where I came to really feel meaning in my life and having some sort of a purpose. And it's interesting to you that you found in your solitude, which to a lot of probably younger women is a terrifying thing because I've met a lot of female artists and composers in my lifetime, and some of them are just terrified if they're by themselves even for 5 hours.
Well, for most of the time, when I was writing these albums, can you hear the thunderstorm outside, by the way? It's just
Um,
raining like cats and dogs.
I can hear you over the storm,
Okay,
so
good. But I was married to Tony, but I always had my own little space, like the garage that was fixed up for me, or the guest house or something. I have
uh-huh.
to say though that that COVID changed that a bit because I started getting terribly lonely. I don't have a car. Also, I learned to drive when I was 30. I never liked driving in LA, and I just kind of stopped having a car a few years ago. But it got to the point where I was really looking forward to walking to CVS and picking up something in my mask just so that I could hear the live sound of other people's voices and conversation. It's kind of heavy not being in
Yeah,
contact with people.
the pandemic was something that I really was devastated by. And ironically, Lorraine, the reason that my podcast got started was to help out of work studios, musicians, and producers whose entire lives were destroyed by the pandemic because
I
I
know.
was, kind of having the same experience like, oh my God, I can't teach any more piano lessons because the piano store is closed. I can't
Mhm.
go play my Friday and Saturday night gig at the Celebrity Steakhouse because they're closed. Then there started being all the protests where they were smashing in the windows of all the stores on Santa Monica Boulevard. Brentwood, which was always a very rich area, that became a war zone. So while all of that was happening, I was thinking to myself, the same kind of thing as you. It's like, wow, I'd really like to go out and have an interaction with other people, but I'm going to get stabbed to death.
I didn't
So,
realize
what?
that Brentwood was a war zone.
Yeah, it
Gee.
turned into a thing where during 2020 and then on into 2023, the gangs that were now that the felony threshold for robbery is only $950. Anything under 950 bucks is not a crime.
Oh,
So what happened is that the gangs in the bad parts of LA figured that out. So they had done enough thievery that they could buy a nice car, like a new Mercedes, get nice suits on, put four of them in a car, and then they would go into the Brentwood area, and one guy would take $950 worth out of the CVS at gunpoint. Then another guy would go down to the Whole Foods market and bash in some windows. And then it just started multiplying to the point of where I saw a story a couple of weeks ago that an older Jewish family during the day, it was either Brentwood or the Palisades, but you know that whole area, it's mostly
yeah.
upscale. The robbers are now showing up in a nice car so that they don't get stopped by security, and they're throwing tear gas into the homes of these people,
Oh,
letting the tear gas take the old people out. And then while the people are under the tear gas, they go in masks and take all of their jewelry. So
well,
that's what I mean by Brentwood being a war zone.
well, it was a very difficult time, and it seems to have abated quite a bit. but it really led me to appreciate even
Yeah.
just if I had something I absolutely had to do, like a routine doctor's appointment, just being able to talk to the Uber driver,
Right.
even
Right.
after the window
Exactly.
was open. Yeah, I just felt so starved for you know,
Contact.
contact and conversation.
Well, yeah, and so that's how my show got going is I just was interviewing all these guys that are like, well, my next, and playing with Hubert Laws. We had all these gigs that were canceled. And my buddy Larry plays with, Pablo Cruz, and they had a whole year canceled. And my other buddy Carmen plays with, oh gosh, what's the older guy? Big Girls Don't Cry from Frankie Valli.
Oh,
And, yeah, they had 18 months of gigs canceled. So
yeah,
everybody was at home in front of their computer, and I said, well, I can make something happen with that. So I
yeah.
just started doing this show.
People did their best, and my friend Stephanie Trick, my amazing little stride sister, I call her,
Oh, yeah, right.
with whom I did a second stride album after my Fat Swallow one, is married to another great pianist, Paolo Alderighi. They live in Milan and St. Louis. And in
Nice.
a condo in St. Louis, they would do little concerts. They just
Wow.
did their best. And eventually they began touring again. But it was different for everybody in different ways. And I'm glad to have gone through it and to be sitting here feeling
I'm
good.
just happy that I'm just happy that somebody at your level would do my show at all because
Stop.
I've just watched you from afar for so many decades and knowing your dad, from the early Catalina Jazz Club on Cahuenga was the first night I met him was at a Dizzy Gillespie gig. And
Wow.
that was the first thing Dizzy did when he came out because Leonard was there. And he and your mom were sitting right in front of me and my date. And I didn't know who this guy was in the like multicolored, weird, like suit jacket. Your dad had these crazy clothes that he wore sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, he had this
For some
wacky
reason, I can't
coat.
picture it.
Yeah, it was this multicolored kind of English looking stylish suit coat. And I was like, wow, I wonder who that guy is in that fancy coat. And then the show starts and Dizzy Gillespie, the first thing he does is he doesn't even say welcome to Catalina. He just says, Leonard Feather is sitting right there.
Dizzy, there were a lot of famous people in and out of our apartment in New York when I was a kid, but Dizzy was one of the prominent figures.
Really?
I knew him pretty well. His wife was also named Lorraine. She gave
Oh.
me a beautiful little ballerina pin that I lost because I used to just lose everything.
Uh-huh.
Years, but he was so friendly. He was just the warmest, greatest, most enthusiastic guy, and I remember him more distinctly than I do almost anybody from those days.
And then but when this was happening, you were basically like a little kid, right?
Yeah, yeah. When Dizzy was coming around and stuff. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. When we lived in New York, um, that was up until I was 12, and
Okay.
then we went to LA. I came back to New York on my own when I was 18,
Ah.
and lived with a roommate and waitressed like endlessly, and was in a few shows, and then started doing Top 40 and Petula Clark and Grand Funk Railroad and various assorted things I did.
Well, yeah, when I saw that in your bio that you sang background for Petula Clark, I was like, man, I know a lot of my younger people out there are gonna just have to go Google that because
Who's
I
that?
I know I even have students now. Sometimes it's sad because I had a student when I said, "Do you like the music of the Beatles?" They said, "Man, the Beatles are the best band ever." And then alternatively, I have a student who's a computer guy at Google, and I said, "What do you think of Kenny G's music?" And he said, "Who's Kenny G? You never heard of him?"
Yeah.
So,
Well, that was a gig where I pretended to read. It's a big story for
right.
this,
Well,
and I just lagged behind. There was an orchestra, and no one had time to teach me the parts. And one of the other singers, I'm real busy. I'll send you over the sheet music, the
Uh-huh.
chart. And I can't read. I didn't tell her, but when we got up on stage at the Riviera in Las Vegas, we just ran through the tunes, and I lagged behind everybody, sort of a
Just kind
half,
of learning it on the
kind of
fly.
kind of learning it on the fly. And Petula said, "Oh, that was lovely." She couldn't tell because I memorized well. So by the time we had sung it through a couple of times, I kind of knew my parts.
Well, some of those gigs that are listed in your bio are just the kinds of things that most people wouldn't ever go deep enough to really, be able to comprehend all of the stuff that we go through. And you know, with your current work that's out now, and I don't know if anybody else has called you Jazzy Joni Mitchell. I'm going to claim that one. But they wouldn't really think, oh, well, yeah, of course her background was singing backgrounds for Grand Funk Railroad and Petula Clark. I mean, Petula Clark was so huge on the radio. And then what was it like for you? You just, okay, we're going to Vegas, and you guys just went there for weeks or traveled or what?
Petula, you mean?
Yeah.
I got this gig, and it was only for, I think it was 3 weeks.
Okay.
And Grand Funk was a couple of months of touring. They had a plane in Flint, Michigan, where they lived, and we would go there. It was a prop plane. It didn't always start right away, and the other singer was terrified of flying, and so she would take so much Dramamine that she was just out by the time we were real. But yeah, I was just bumbling around until I learned to write lyrics, and then I tried to sing well enough so that my voice could catch up to my writing in a way, and that went on
Right.
for some time.
Right. But
Yeah.
did you formally study voice? I mean, obviously you had all these great singers and players in jazz, the cream of the crop coming to your home when you were a kid. Did they teach you stuff?
No, my dad gave me piano lessons with John Lewis, and I refused to practice like a little brat. And also John Mahegan, and I refused to practice. Just like, no, I don't want to learn music. I don't. I just don't care. But then
Wow.
later, I I just started singing to make money because I had a good ear, and I could learn these at the time, disco tunes and stuff. But I started at one point. I did a gig in Los Angeles, and a friend of my boyfriend's at that time said Lorraine needs to work on her break, the difference between your chest voice and your head voice,
Uh-huh.
right? Two
Right.
ranges. And she said she should study with Ron Anderson. Seth Riggs, who's a famous vocal
Oh
teacher.
yeah, I know Seth Riggs. Yeah.
He taught Michael Jackson famously. So I studied with a teacher named Ron Anderson who was doing the Seth Riggs method, and
Right.
then I got the recordings from his book Singing with the Stars, Seth Riggs,
Ah.
and I still have them, and I still practice to them. Their tongue trills and lip rolls and stuff, and I've been using them for many years, and it's easier for me now to go up and down over my break, but it's not perfect, but it's better. But you know what you said about Joni Mitchell? Some people have compared me to her. Other people in recent years have said Tom Waits, or more than once, this might surprise you, Laurie Anderson.
And right there, we're going to have to pause it because we're out of time for part one, but I hope you'll come back and do more with me today,
Part
Lorraine.
two.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.